Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be focusing on TPN calculations. So over here we have our conversion table with one extra item, which is converting from nitrogen to protein and vice versa. It's important for TPN calculations because we normally convert our protein to nitrogen and that helps us choose a bag. Okay, so in this case, we say 1 gram of nitrogen is equal to 6.25 grams of protein. Okay, if we're going to convert from protein to nitrogen, you simply divide by 6.25 grams. Okay, so we're going to be looking at that and then also a few other things that is important for TPN calculations. Okay, so we have a case study that says the patient is a gunshot wound victim with multiple injuries to the viscera, including liver, small and large bowel. He underwent an explorative laparotomy as well as multiple relooks. So this patient has undergone extensive surgeries and he is a trauma patient. Okay, it also indicates that this patient has a normal BMI and the weight that they give us is 70 kilograms. Okay, so I'm trying to keep the case studies super simple so that we understand the basics in order to then do other advanced things basically. Okay, so we're going to calculate the requirements. I'll just get my calculator. So for the energy, when we just start feeding a patient, we need to obviously start slow. So the initial energy range is from 20 to 25 kcal per kilogram per day. TPN energy requirements is very similar to enteral. So yeah, and then obviously recovery is 25 to 30 kcal per kilogram per day. But please make sure you're using the latest guidelines, etc. So I'm going to be using 25 kcal for this patient. So 25 multiplied by 17 multiplied by 4.2 because we need to convert to, I need black. We need to convert to kilojoules. So it's going to be 7350 kilojoules per day. Okay, so now we have our energy. Then we move on to protein. Okay, let's just highlight this so it's easier to see. Okay, with protein, I'm using 1.3 grams per kilogram per day. So that gives me 91 grams. Ooh, that's a highlighter. Then 91 grams per day. But we have to convert this amount to nitrogen. So you simply divide this, so that's the total, and if we divide this by 6.25 grams, you get 14.56. With nitrogen, you want to keep the decimal places, so that's why we're keeping both places. Okay, so this is your nitrogen. Let's just highlight that in a different color, maybe blue. Okay, and that. Okay, and then when we're calculating carbs and fats, we use non-protein energy. Okay, so our energy gets split. So if you look at this little turquoise box, it says total energy is equal to protein energy plus non-protein energy. So we need to calculate the amount of energy that we're getting from protein. And we already have the total energy. We need to then calculate non-protein energy, which, as I've said, we're going to be using for the carbs and the fats. Okay, divide. Okay, so to calculate your protein energy, you're going to multiply by 17. So let's do that and see what we have. It's 1547 kilojoules. Okay. So if we take our total energy, it's 7350. And then we subtract the protein energy from that. We get 5803 kilojoules. Okay, so that's going to be your non-protein energy. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and write it over here so we know what we're working with. Okay, so for carbs and fats, you can either use the percentage non-protein energy for your calculations or the gram per kilogram per day based on a specific guideline. So follow the latest guidelines, but I normally use a percentage non-protein energy. So there are different ratios for different disease conditions. That's why I said it's based on the disease condition of the patient. So either they maybe have a fat intolerance, or they're in a hypoglycemic state, or they're in respiratory distress, etc., then the ratios are going to be different. Okay, so for this patient, we are assuming that he is normoglycemic. Okay, so for that condition, we then use 60% of non-protein energy from carbs and then 40% from fat or lipids. Okay, make sure that these percentages always add up to 100% because you are working with these carbs and fat make up non-protein energy, so they have to be equal to 100%. Okay, if that makes sense. So yeah, so for example, in a different condition, say your patient had a fat intolerance. Okay, say there was like a major like liver injury or something, the patient had a fat intolerance, so you would use 75% of non-protein energy from carbs, and then you'd use 25% of non-protein energy from fat. Okay, so we went ahead and calculated the carbs and the fats. So carbs I got 205 grams, and then fat was 61 grams. Okay, so I rounded up the figures there. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put all of this information into our table. Using a table to calculate your requirements gives you clarity on all of your values, and then you can go ahead and compare the different bags. Okay, so for example, my first row, I have all the I'm going to add in all the requirements, and then we are going to add in the different bag options that I can choose from, and that's very clear, or that meets my requirements, and then you can choose one from there. Okay, so something that we forgot to calculate is fluid. So we need to calculate fluid. So fluid for TPN, the requirements is 20 to 40 moles per kilogram per day. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've calculated the fluid requirements. Obviously, you need to take note of things like losses and everything else. So I've calculated a range. Use your latest guidelines when calculating your fluids. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put in all the figures into the table. Ooh, thought that was the highlighter. Okay, so now we've added everything into the table, and you are ready to calculate which bag meets your requirements as well as the feeding volume. So I'm going to do that in the next video. Okay, to end today's video, I have done a 3 things summary. So things that we've covered in the video. So number 1 is to calculate the total amount of energy from protein, which is your protein energy. Okay. So protein energy, done. Then to convert your protein requirements to nitrogen, which we have done, and to calculate your non-protein energy by subtracting your protein energy from your total energy, which we have done. So these are three important things to take note of when calculating requirements for TPN.